Welcome back, everybody. I'm now joined by David Ochoa. First place all by yourself. Congratulations, Webb.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's good to be in first, and hopefully that translates into a first seed berth in the playoffs. But it's going to be a long 3 weeks, and a lot of stuff can change. So we'll have to
Yep.
see what's going on.
Yeah, if you guys haven't seen our playoffs before, whoever's in first place gets a bye all the way through to the finals. Whoever's in second place at the end of the regular season gets a bye into the semis. So the 3 seed plays the 4 seed. That's our first playoff show. The winner of that plays the 2 seed. The winner of that plays the 1 seed. So winning the regular season is kind of a big deal. You are in the finals if you win the regular season. And yeah, Webb is. I doubt you've mathematically clinched playoffs at this point, but it's actually possible. Like it's
I haven't taken a look at it. Just
like from 5-1, like even if you wind up at 5-4, right? Can 4 people really get above you? You've probably clinched a tie for the 4 seed at worst case. This would be my guess off the top of my head, but things are going well. That's safe to say.
yeah. Speaking of going well, take a look at this week 6 bracket. You can see a little bit of the results are somewhat lopsided. Who do you think is going to win this matchup?
I like Bob's chances all of a sudden.
Yeah, so do I.
I was so close. God, how insane would the Ephro tilt have been if I had never given him a single turn? If I win the die roll, turn 1 him, and then kill him in his own upkeep on his first turn of game 2, that would have just been an all-time sodium display, right? I was so close. Yeah. Never actually pulled off the Ley Line of Sanctity kill. I've dreamed of the Ley. That would have been such a good time for it. I just felt close. Game 3 was sort of kind of almost there. I don't know. I'm pretty sure the green is just wrong in that deck at this point. It feels it's a little too fragile. Like even the Living Wish that I drew in the second game, if that had just been an Expedition map, I could have gotten my Academy. I could have won the second game before he managed to lock me up. But
yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. I mean, playing against workshops, it always seems like you're just 1 mana off from doing anything until they play another spell, and that's generally how the games play out.
Well, yeah, that's why Game 3 didn't actually feel all that close to me. I mean, it kind of was sort of close, but I mean, I was always giving him a turn and then hoping he would stop doing things, and then I had to draw something. It's Game 2 that I felt like if that diminishing returns had just been better. Or, like, oh man, the Wasteland. Right, if I have either green mana or blue mana, then I'm fine, even after a couple of turns in Game 2. But, like, I didn't have green mana or blue mana once he wasted my Tropical. Oh well.
Yeah, you just had all these cantrips, but no mana to cast them with.
Awkward.
Yeah, so moving on, you want to take a look at this matchup that we've got to go on? What do you think is going to happen?
That's a good question. So it's Bob versus Steve, and that means there's no workshop deck, and there's no storm deck. What is going on?
This is vintage at its finest. It's just the gentleman's blue mirror.
I like it. I would be totally all in for the gentleman's agreement to all play blue decks. None of this storm or combo stuff. Let's just have some cantrips, try to sit behind a grip of mana drains. That would be awesome.
Yeah. I'm just going to play my blue spells, and you can play your blue spells. No Wastelands, no Dredge, no Workshops, no Rush 15, etc., etc.
No Rush 15, that's exactly right. Now, do you think one of these decks is better set up for the blue mirror? We can look at the deck list while these guys are getting set up. I guess Bob's on Mentor, Steve's on Delver, but those decks overlap by a lot.
Yeah, so let's take a look at Bob's deck. At least for game 1, I mean, they both have gushes in them, right?
Yeah.
So, Monastery Mentor is pretty huge just because it lets you generate a bunch of threats out of nowhere. And so what I anticipate the games playing out like is that they'll be jockeying for position for a while, and then like if Bob can land a Mentor, then that'll be pretty good. If you can sequence something afterwards, like a Gush into a Preordain, and then we'll be able to build up to that advantage. But it also depends on the removal that Steve has to answer that, and so I think it's going to be a lot of bolting at first.
Yeah, let's look at Steve's deck if we can. Bob's got his Plows and his Sideboard, which could be relevant. I mean, he's got them, but I mean, his deck, you can't assume you're going to get matched up against another creature deck the way Vintage plays out these days. Oh, let's not look at Steve's deck. How about we just look at his opening hand? They're ready? Yes. Let's get down to the match. And
All
here
right.
we are. One of these
So
guys is going to fall into the last place tie with Kai among other luminaries. One of these guys is going to pull his record to 500. What do you think of these draws, Webb?
well, we've got Bob on the play, and he has a misstep force and mentor with a pair of lands. So that looks like it's okay. We've got Echoing Truth, but that can be pitched to Forcible, and then if they end up throwing all their resources at each other, Treasure Cruise to gas up. So kind of like keeping my hand if I were Bob. And then Steve's hand on the draw seems like it's pretty reasonable also. He's got his one of his favorite cards, Gush, which he literally wrote the book on. And Brainstorm also. So I can't imagine passing that hand up either, especially with two Swords of Plowshares to defend against Monster Mentors.
Yeah, I mean, the second plow was his draw step, so he'd already kept by then. But I like the two Flusterstorms, too. This is one of the matchups where Flusterstorm really shines.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this match plays out, and I anticipate some pretty long games. So the viewers will get their money's worth. So Bob could be in a little bit of trouble if he doesn't end up hitting a land next turn. Well, I guess in 2 turns because he'll have to discard, but not anymore since he's countering Steve's Brainstorm. Steve can't really do anything about that, but with the Gush in hand, he's not really concerned about it. Second Gush.
Yeah, they're both on 2
So-
lands, but those Gushes do give Menendian the edge.
Oh yeah, Steve's going to be churning through his deck with relative ease, whereas Bob really needs to draw a mana source to make sure that it doesn't stumble, to give Steve extra time to actually use those Gushes to pull ahead too much.
Yeah, he's going to fire off the Git Probe. He's not sacking his fetch lands. He's very interested in drawing a land here.
Yeah, he just wants to keep as many lands in his deck as he can to increase those odds ever so slightly. And Steve has the option of gushing in response to Flusterstorm, but that's pretty bad just because he ends up setting himself back on resources. So he's gonna just flop his hand on the table and say, "Hey, well, this is what I got. Deal with it."
Yep.
And Bob can go from there. So if you're Bob, what do you think you're going to be trying to do as far as a game plan once you see Steve's hand?
I'm leaning on the Treasure Cruise. I mean, I think you have to feed Mentor to Plow. You'd love a window where you could sort of defend it with the Force of Will and not be vulnerable to Flusterstorm, but that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, but you're so far off casting Treasure Cruise, so it's...
Oh,
ooh,
interesting.
wow.
Yeah,
Third
so
Mentor might actually get the job done, since Steve has the first 2 covered with those 2 Swords to Plowshares.
right. The third one, though, Steve actually has no answer to the third one in his current hand. Now, that said, Bob's got to come up with land number 3. I mean, plan A for Bob Maher is definitely draw mana.
Yeah. And what Bob really wants to do is just, well, I guess draw lands, but draw Ancestral into like lands so you can start casting them. And
Be nice.
if he can play a Mentor and then get a little bit of advantage by casting another spell afterwards, then that may be a way that he can sort of creep ahead from Steve's removal. And so that can be one plan that he's got. Unfortunately, that's not really going to work out too well. Ooh, wow. Cabal Therapy. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I like the Cabal Therapy aspect of Bob's deck a lot. It seems like this matchup in particular, it's going to be nice. He's even got the information from Gitaxian Probe here. It just runs into Flusterstorm if he plays it, but maybe that's okay.
Yeah, he's not going to play the Cabal Therapy. It's just he really wants it to resolve, and he wants to make Steve play something else to ensure that the therapy doesn't resolve, like Gush in response and then Flusterstorm. Like, having Cabal Therapy resolve is going to be very important because it's going to clear a path to make those mentors be pretty safe.
Yeah, at some level, though, he's got 7 cards. If Bob doesn't draw a land next turn, I think he has to just trade Cabal Therapy for one of those counter spells.
I would just discard, I think. I think that's a better
Really?
play. Yeah, the Cabal Therapy is just so important right now. Whereas something like Echoing Truth isn't going to be nearly as good.
Echoing Truth is your blue card for Force of Will.
Yeah, but it seems like this game is going to go on long enough to where you'll end up drawing into another blue card. It's just getting that therapy to resolve is going to be pretty important, I think. Although it depends on, wow.
Plow number 3. That's all of
Yeah.
them.
And much to Steve's liking, he has no creatures, so he doesn't actually have to cast Delver Secrets. He just keep on playing lands and spells that draw cards into more spells that don't cast that aren't creatures. But so Steve has a lot of cards in his hand. He's got 2 blue floating, and nothing really to do with it except for maybe hard cast another Gush.
He could hard cast Gush, but he's already on 8 cards, so he's already discarding.
Yeah, I anticipate the Volcanic Island going to the bin.
Volcanic, not plow number 3.
Maybe plow 3. It'd be one or the other.
If you discard Volcanic, you're in the same situation next turn.
Yeah, that's true.
I have seen Menendian discard land in this spot. I would discard Swords number 3. I don't know what Steve's going to do.
Yeah, Swords number 3 seems like a reasonable choice, especially given that Steve is working with hidden information, I think, as far as Bob's hand is concerned.
Yeah, right. What are the odds of Bob having 3 of his 4 mentors, right?
Yeah.
Not high.
Right, yeah, so looks like Steve is deciding which of his 8 cards he's going to discard. He's not going to discard Swords to Plowshares number 1 and 2, but the third one gets the boot.
And there's the land.
Here we go. So this will be interesting. What do you think? Cabal Therapy?
I think I run out. Well, let's see. You can Cabal Therapy with the ability to pay for Flusterstorm. It sounds pretty attractive.
Yeah, definitely. And Bob has Force of Will still to use, so if he casts Cabal Therapy going for cards in his graveyard, he's got, that would be Probe, or 2 blue cards, Cabal Therapy, that's 3, 2 fetch lands, that's 5, so not quite there with Treasure Cruise. I would assume that he's probably just going to pass the turn after that, assuming Steve counters it with Mental Misstep. But it looks like he's opting for one of his Monastery Mentors because he figures that it's going to be good to use all of his mana while he can, and then maybe next turn he can, if hopefully draw a 4th land, play Mentor, play Cabal Therapy, and then tear Steve's hand asunder, as some people might say.
That's fair. And he also saw Steve discard a sword, so he knows these mentors are like, he may actually legit be able to run Steve out of answers. When Bob saw Steve's hand with that Gitaxian Probe, there were 2 plows in it, I believe.
Yeah, he knows that he has Gush, 2 Flusterstorms, Swords to Plowshares, Volcanic Island. And the hidden cards are Misstep and Swords to number 2. So it'll be interesting to see what he names. Probably would just go with Flusterstorm.
I think I like Mentor here rather than Therapy.
Yeah.
The Therapy's obviously better after Mentor. You want to, whatever fight you're going to fight, you'd love to have a Mentor and play first.
Yeah, it just lets you use all of your mana, and that's going to end up being important, especially with just Treasure Cruise in your hand. You just really want to be able to maximize that. And
here's an interesting question.
Go ahead.
Presumably, Steve's going to point a plow at the Mentor, which Bob knows. Do you force?
Well, you know that Steve also has 2 Flusterstorms.
Right, but you get a monk, which means your Therapy can be flashed back. Like, it sets you up to go Therapy and flash it back next turn.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's only because of the monk that I would make this trade, but I like this trade from Bob's point of view. I think that monk and getting the card in the graveyard for Treasure Cruise actually kind of tilts this over to the point where doesn't really feel like you're getting 2 for 1.
Yeah, it's not as bad. Especially since you figured that the Flusterstorm is going to get pointed at either Force of Will or Treasure Cruise, so you might as well get a monk out of it, and then since you there.
And the Echoing Truth is very close to just being a dead card anyway.
Oh,
it's not like that was going to do anything better than be fodder for Force of Will.
Yeah, if not being exiled, then saving a Monastery Mentor from a removal spell would probably be its most useful application. Ooh. Mox Pearl, not quite what Steve wanted to draw, unfortunately. So he's probably just going to play that and then pass the turn. Then
he's got the ability to hard cast Gush if Bob doesn't do anything. That's Bob's not going to not do anything, but I mean, from Steve's perspective, the 5th mana feels at least a little bit relevant.
I suspect that Steve will probably not hardcast Gush just because he would. He has Flusterstorm in his hand, so there's more of
And
a
I mean,
reason to.
I meant on Bob's end step. You wouldn't end step hardcast Gush?
No, I'd rather
Ah.
just leave mana. I would leave up mana, and I know Steve is more likely to leave up mana than I am.
Fair. That is fair. All right, Bob found land number 4. He now has the ability to therapy and mentor. He does have to decide the order. He knows about a Flusterstorm, and that's it? Or does he know about the second Gush?
He knows about the second Gush also. He does not
Okay.
know about the right-hand side of the Steve's hand, but he knows about the left. And right now, I actually like playing out the Mentor first, just because you're going to get another Monk token, and that seems like a pretty big game.
Well, being able to pay for Flusterstorm is not bad either.
But if you have a bunch of monks, you don't really care if your therapy resolves. I mean, you're either going to name Flusterstorm or you're going to name Gush, and if Steve lets therapy resolve or would let it resolve, he might cast Gush in response, just because he has so many resources in play already, and that'll give him also 2 unknown cards in his hand. So that would make it more difficult for therapy to be actually good there. Bob would only know about the Flusterstorm at that point, and so it's like not as good of a proposition to counter it. But I would have just run the Mentor out there, just because I think, from Bob's perspective, just because, yeah.
You're just okay with trading half a therapy for Flusterstorm if you get a monk in the trade.
Yeah, getting a monk in the trade seems like it's much more enticing. Whereas now, if you're not
flash it
getting
back.
that.
Yeah, I mean, you still get a monk off this half. And now, if you're Steve, what do you do? Well, he's got the plow. So he's going to do that. Even though that would have been a blind name. I don't think Bob was going to try to blind, soul read him for swords. I think Bob was going to name Flusterstorm or Gush. Steve just has to decide whether he wants to choose Flusterstorm on Bob's behalf or whether he wants to give Bob the choice.
Bob knows his entire hand, so if he lets that resolve,
I believe
then
so.
yeah.
Steve can choose for him, or he can give Bob the choice. I think you're supposed to choose for him.
I'm just gonna gush here if I were Steve, because Bob's gonna name that gush if therapy resolves.
And now, since you know he's going to hit, you just need Flusterstorm it.
Yeah, at this point, since Steve Bob has already played a land, so I would just Flusterstorm at this point, just to keep your hand hidden.
Agreed.
So all in all, Bob ends up being down a token, but he still has Treasure Cruise in his hand, so he'll see if he can resolve that next turn, and that's going to end up costing only 1 mana approximately.
I mean, you gotta like Bob's position here. I mean, not only does he have Treasure Cruise, which is just about online, but he's got that 3rd mentor, and he's run Steve out of plows.
True, but Steve does have 2 Snapcaster mages in his deck, I think, or yeah.
Fair. He's just got to find something, is my point.
Yeah. I guess certainly helps, and the Flusterstorm is going to make it easier to counter that Treasure Cruise. I suspect that Steve is probably going to play Delver Go, say past turn. Then if Bob plays Treasure Cruise next turn, which will cost 2 mana, so he won't be able to play Mentor, then Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, I was looking at that. He's just 1 card in graveyard off of being able to do it in the order he wants.
Yeah, Steve's going to Gush in response, then Flusterstorm to make it a mana leak. Make him pay 3 when he'll be unable to do that. So it will end up being Delver plus a handful of 2 random cards plus 3 lands versus. Ooh, that'll good.
Do. That's great. Now he gets to go Mentor into Gush into Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, so Bob's going to just really go off here. And probably hold up an untapped Black Source to draw in a Cabal Therapy to use. And then returning an Underground Sea and a Tundra to his hand. So pulling ahead little by little, which is what ends up happening with Mentor in these situations. When we were talking in the pregame, he sequences draws enough so that he makes a token here, a token there. It'll be able to run away with a bit of advantage, and that's what it looks like is happening. All right, so if you're Steve, what are you trying to draw into?
I mean, you might gush his response here, hoping for Force of Will. I think you should, actually. Like, both Force of Will and Snapcaster are useful. And, like, letting this Mentor resolve feels bad. I think you're going to gush here. So you may as well do it as response to the Mentor in case you find Force of Will.
Yeah, that's, I think, what Steve is going to do also. He didn't, if you notice, he didn't play the Mentor, so he wants to save it for Force of Will. Again, like, not casting
Wow.
All right,
No
so,
response.
yeah. So we're going to see Bob starting to go off now.
Oh, yeah.
And even if you get your Treasure Cruise countered, you're still getting a monk out of the deal. So,
Right.
and depending on what he draws from this gush, that could be not that relevant.
And it's possible that Steve will Flusterstorm the gush. Wouldn't be
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Steve knows all but one card in his hand,
Yeah.
and this Flusterstorm is going to get get 2 cards. So now Bob is going to end up just being able to Treasure Cruise here, which
Indeed.
unfortunately isn't really going to work out too well for Steve. He'll have to like float mana and gush in response, hopefully hit a Flusterstorm or a Force of Will. And with so many Flusterstorms gone already, that's going to be less likely, and Snapcaster Mage won't do it. So it looks like this Treasure Cruise is going to be more likely to resolve than not. And that'll put Bob pretty far ahead, especially with Mentor and 3 Monk tokens.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult to come back against that.
He could, in theory, play his land for the turn and leave a card in his graveyard, but I think this is better. Give himself the ability to cast a Cabal Therapy, for example, after the Treasure Cruise. So I like delving all 7 here.
Oh, yeah. And he knows that Steve has a Tundra, but he doesn't know about the 2 other cards. Well, he'll know about them in a second once he picks a hand.
So he will. And make a Monk token. One of these monks gets to attack, too. The one without 70 sickness is up to 4/4 now, and it's going to presumably hit 5/5.
It's going to be a chunk of damage, that's for sure. And what Bob can also do is maybe save a spell and then cast Mana Drain for a miniature overrun next turn. Which I suspect will end up happening.
Like, just the Preordain is lethal next turn, I think. He's just going to go ahead and cast it now, which seems fine.
Yeah. He's so far ahead that he has access to Steve's list, so that's not going to... it means that he knows that he's pretty safe from just casting all the spells and going nuts right now. So it looks like Bob's probably going to win game 1, and you're going to go to sideboarding. Before
Ball therapy.
Yeah.
So
it's
good.
not really going to end up mattering too much.
No. Oh, who needs Cabal Therapy? We'll just take Ancestral Recall instead. How's that for overrun?
Yeah, it's a solid chunk for 5 damage.
Oh, by the way, also deals +6 damage.
And there's a Force of Will. So he would have drawn into it.
You know what that means? Yeah, if he had gushed as a response to the Mentor, he would have, in fact, found Force of Will. Yeah, I still think he should have gushed as a response to the Mentor before all of that got started. I mean, he's basically got 2 draws for Force of Will, but that's a lot better than what happened.
Yeah, I would have gushed in response. It's just Mentor is pretty problematic, and even the Monk, like one Monk isn't really going to steal a game, but a Monastery Mentor unchecked, like as you saw, just ran away with it, and Steve isn't going to be able to come back from it. So it's going to be a game 1 win for Bob there.
Delver's like, I got this. I'll hold them off. Don't worry. I got this.
Delvers are holding off the fort. but just one though because Force of Will needs some fodder. Unfortunately, this Ancient Grudge isn't going to do much here. So
Force of Will mathematically can't matter. If you're Force of Willing a spell, that means Bob got 6 prowess triggers, and the game is over.
details. I may be dead, but I countered your spell. It did not resolve. There
Fair
are
enough.
small victories in that.
Look, you can't let him draw 3 cards. It's important.
Yes.
Send a message.
Yes, that is sending a message. Oftentimes is very important.
Bob's like, I too can send a message. I'm going to resolve my ancestral whether you like it or not.
Yeah, Bob's going to attack for approximately 1 million.
Approximately.
If my math is correct.
Yeah, Steve has seen enough.
Yeah. All right,
Wow.
so we're going to sideboarding. Who do you think improves from here? We've got 2 of these blue decks, and
That's a good question.
Steve has a bunch of Stony Silences and Nature's Claims and
He has a Sulfur
Trap
Elemental.
Speeches. Sulfur Elemental.
White creatures get +1, +1/-1, and split second. So Sulfur Elemental is a big game against Mentor. All the monks are dead, and the Mentor himself is now a 1/1.
Yeah, I mean, still being able to attack for 3 is something, at least.
It's not game over. I'm just saying it's a big game. Like, it doesn't single-handedly win the game. It's not like, Null Rod against Belcher or something, but it's in that category in terms of how powerful it is as a hoser. I mean, Pyroblast is obviously also going to come in for Steve.
Yeah, Bloodfire Mentor still attacks for pretty heartily. And so it looks like Steve is sideboarding out Snapcaster Mage and...
Of course, it's a blue matchup. Why would you want creatures in your deck?
Snapcaster Mage seems like it's pretty reasonable, though.
I agree. I would not side out Snapcasters. I think isn't this the matchup what you have Snapcasters for?
Snapcaster does seem pretty good here. So
Bob
looking at
plows, presumably.
Those plows are staying home. It seems like.
Wow. What did he do? Anything?
He boarded out a mana drain and boarded something in. I'm not entirely sure.
Well, he's on 59 cards right now. So.
Okay.
He's decided to take out a mana drain. That's how far we got.
Yeah. Seems like I like keeping Jason here. It's a counterspell that can't be countered. I guess it's Bob's worried about Delver or Pyroblast.
Dig through time too.
Dig through time also.
I shaved Force of Will in this matchup, by the way. I mean, I don't know that.
I like keeping Mindbreak Trap in, or bringing it in rather. If you just take a look at any of these exchanges, they often include tons of spells.
True.
And so being able to have a spell that deals with Flusterstorm other than Cabal Therapy seems like it's pretty reasonable.
And you get 2 for 1 on Force of Will. This is an attrition matchup, and it's slow. I mean, it's easier for Bob to do than Steve. Like, Steve has to worry about a Mentor just running amok. Like, Force of Willing a Mentor is just more important than Force of Willing Young Pyromancer. This Young Pyromancer doesn't get as out of control as quickly.
Yeah, and it looks like Bob is bringing in the Swords of the Plowshare, so it'll give him an answer to the Delver Secrets and any Pyromancers that run amok and let loose, which I like. I like that. Jace isn't that great when addressing those creatures. Although Jace bouncing your Delvers, I guess that's...
I'm surprised Bob took out the Dig Through Time. Like, both Dig Through Time and Jace, I believe, wound up in his sideboard. Like, if those aren't good in this matchup, why are you playing these cards? Isn't this the matchup where they're at their best?
Yeah, that's kind of surprising. I generally like the Dig Through Time at the very least. And it looks like Steve is choosing whether or not to play or draw. I assume he's playing. He's got a pretty good hand. Like Brainstorm, Fetch Land, Force, Flusterstorm, Preordain. So he's going to be able to play some lands and then eventually start sculpting or digging for a Delver. And I like that. I like being able to have that Brainstorm to find a Delver because it feels like Bob is the control here, and so I'd want to beat down as quickly as possible. And what do you think about Bob's hand?
It wants a Gataxian Probe.
Oh.
You want to be able to hit with that Cabal Therapy. Yeah, Time Walk is solid. I mean, Explore is a totally reasonable effect in this matchup.
Yeah, especially when people are throwing around Gushes right and left.
Yeah, here I think you just time walk.
Yeah, I like
Maybe you're lucky
that.
enough to draw a Gitaxian Probe. If not, cast your Preordain.
Yeah, I like casting Time Walk here just because, I mean, he has Guts in hand, and then next turn he can, if he doesn't draw a Mentor, then he can always just blind Cabal Therapy for something, because he'll have 3 mana, so he will be able to play around Flusterstorm if he's concerned about that. It looks like
So he goes
he
for the
goes
Preordain, which if
and
he found a
Yawgmoth's
Gitaxian
one.
Probe here, he'd be set up for Cabal Therapy. But do you want Yawgmoth's Will right now?
I think that Yawgmoth's Will is probably better in my hand than at the bottom of my deck, given
Oh,
how.
and he did find the Gitaxian Probe. That was nice.
Yeah. So Bob's gonna fire that off, and Steve can brainstorm in response. It looks like.
Well, I don't think you brainstorm in response to this. You brainstorm in response to the therapy, right?
Yeah, that's what you're gonna end up doing.
Or maybe you Flusterstorm the therapy. Either way, though, Bob gets so much just delicious information.
Yeah.
And it makes that therapy threatening where Steve knows it's going to hit rather than just, thinking maybe I can survive a blind name.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Steve ends up playing the response to therapy, because he can brainstorm and then like put his 2 best cards back. But with that fetch land, I'd be more incentivized to just hold the brainstorm for when he floods out, and then use a Flusterstorm on it. Flusterstorm is a pretty good card in this matchup, though, so using it on a therapy when Bob knows his hand, so he'll be able to flash it back without and still be able to hit is not an ideal spot. And yeah, as I was saying earlier, I definitely want Yogg-Will in my hand in this matchup. It's just so slow, and one of those spells that really seals the game and lets you run away with getting a little bit of advantage there. And by a little, I mean like a lot. So
Oh,
Steve
wow.
goes for end of turn brainstorm, which is kind of
That means
surprising.
Bob did not go Mox Jet Cabal Therapy. Is he waiting for Steve to resolve his brainstorm? Like, Bob saw that Steve had a brainstorm. And I think this is Bob's slow rolling his Cabal Therapy so that he knows it'll hit and he doesn't have to play mind games. I did
Yeah,
not anticipate that line.
it seems like it's better if he wants to make it so that he isn't trading Cabal Therapy for Flusterstorm. So
There's
he wants
also
to.
he's still going to risk trading it for Flusterstorm, but there's no longer any chance of it missing.
Uh, from Brom's perspective, it seems like getting Force of Will so he can clear a path for Mentor is going to be what he really wants to do. And so just playing Jet Therapy isn't accomplishing that. He has to worry about cantrip Flusterstorm in response to therapy. Ooh, wow.
Oh,
Sulfur
there's the
Elemental.
Sulfur Elemental.
Yeah. Unfortunately for Bob, he's got a Swords to Plowshares, which is going to end up being pretty good. No amount of split second is going to save it from farming. So it's not going to be too much.
It might take some monks with it, depending on the timing, but yes.
Yeah. So if you're Steve, what are you going to do? Are you going to hold that Sulfur Elemental, or are you going to go out and bash?
Interesting question.
I think Steve's probably going to hold it, but just because of his previous lines with Delver just never casting them.
Yeah, I might play it at 4. Play it with Flusterstorm backup. Okay, now Bob just does run out the therapy. So he got through the brainstorm. That's what he wanted. He wanted Steve to resolve brainstorm so that he wouldn't have to play mind games of trying to figure out what's on top. This way, he either gets a Flusterstorm or gets to name Force of Will. Now, the other thing Bob could have done, if he played the Jet last turn, then he could go therapy with the ability to pay for Flusterstorm. But what he's done by doing it this way, yeah, I don't know. He could have put himself in a position to pay for this Fluster. Well, I mean, Gush would have probably prevented that, but
I don't suspect that Steve would have gushed in response to Cabal Therapy. What Bob could have done, is play Jet either last turn or play it this turn and Time Walk, and then play Cabal Therapy on his Time Walk turn. But as is, he unfortunately traded his therapy away for the Flusterstorm. But now that'll let him time walk and then a
Yeah, I mean,
fresh
look,
turn.
at some level, trading cards when you're building up to Yawgmoth's Will is just fine.
Yeah. All right. He's got a gush, and Steve has a gush, so we'll end up seeing how that ends up working out. And there's a Flusterstorm, which is pretty good. So it's just there's always tension between Dogma's Will and Gush. You want to hit your land drops, but at the same time, Gush is your only draw action spell. So you kind of want to play Gush since you don't have any action. But I suspect that Bob is probably just going to play land pass.
Yeah, I like land pass, especially now that he's got a Flusterstorm.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
is this Yawgmoth's Will for land therapy?
yeah, that's what it looks like. I'm pretty surprised at that.
Or force gush? Like he's willing to take force gush, or he'll get a land and a land Gitaxian probe therapy. It's even better.
Yeah. So basically, Bob is using this Yawgmoth's Will to cast Amnesia on Steve.
I
And he
like it.
doesn't know about the Sulfur Elemental, but having Flusterstorm, Gush, and Plow in your hand leaves you in a pretty reasonable spot. And by Bob holding his land in his hand, it may signify to Steve that Bob does not have any counter magic, like a Flusterstorm, just because he would have potentially played the
Sure.
island in response, or before playing the Yawgmoth's Will. But that would have made like, therapy not an option. But that's not as much of a big deal with so many blue cantrips.
Yeah, if he wanted to defend Yagwa with Flusterstorm, he needed to go land go and set it up for next turn.
Yeah. So I
But I mean,
assume.
this was still reasonable value, right? He got the force and the gush. Steve is down to a sulfur elemental, which Bob can answer with plow. Bob's essentially got a gush and a flusterstorm to Steve's almost nothing.
Yeah, Bob's just pretty far ahead. And, unfortunately, for Bob, Steve drew that mental misstep. Oh, there we go. So therapy is probably going to miss here. And if I were Bob, I would just float some mana and gush here and then
Yeah, I would gush
start,
first as well.
try and draw into a mentor so you can go mentor therapy. We'll have to wait and see. Floating blue-black here. And survey says, yay, more gushes.
Land
Which
and
is,
a gush.
yeah. And at this point, if you're Bob, what would you do? Would you cast therapy, or would you just wait until you draw a mentor or some other good spell that you want to resolve?
I think I hold it.
Yeah. I think holding it is a pretty good choice also, just because you're not really doing anything,
Right.
and hands could just develop much more. I mean, the game can go on for like a bunch of turns before anything actually happens, and
Oh,
so the
hardcast
hands would
gush.
have changed a lot.
I didn't
Yeah,
see that he could get to 5.
there
I
we
like
go.
hardcast gush.
Divining Secrets. Let's see what we've got. Ooh, Snapcaster Mage on
Business.
Yoggle is pretty hot. That does take a lot
That's
of
a lot
mana
of
though,
mana.
so barring Lotus, that's probably a little unrealistic.
Rah, sulfur elemental is here.
And you have to send a message. So that's going to be a 5-turn clock, which is not the shortest clock. I mean, it's pretty reasonable.
Look, it's
But
totally, it's exactly what Steve should do. He's lost the card advantage war. Bob has resolved a gush and another gush. Steve's got nothing in his hand. Bob's got 7 cards. Okay, a couple of them are land, but still, yeah, run that guy out there and hope he's good enough to cause problems. Now we know
yeah,
there's swords to plowshares. God, Bob's now
from
using
Steve's
effective
perspective, he's
probe
got to.
therapy.
Yeah, from Steve's perspective, he has to start being down because he can't keep up with all those gushes, and he knows it. So Bob's going to be able to see Steve's hand and realize that the coast is basically clear. Therapy on misstep here means that he'll be able to save Flusterstorm for a more important spell, and he's just going to sword the Sulfur Elemental. Yeah, well, I guess the probe is not going to reveal Steve's hand. That's fine. Bob's just going to go underground sea therapy you off of the jet, and then probably ponder and swords.
Is that all?
Yeah, that's it.
But Steve's got a sulfur elemental.
Yeah, Steve hoping that he draws a reverse card so he can probably just get a bunch of cards in his hand. He's at this point, Bob is just running away with the game. It's going to take a lot of draw spells that are chained together for Steve to add this, but Flusterstorm really makes that difficult.
Bob is there's a little temptation here to leave up Flusterstorm. I don't know what it would actually counter though.
Let's see. It would, if Steve drew into like a bunch of small cantrips into a big cantrip, that would be a good defense.
Sure.
Like probe and preordain into ancestral or time.
Yeah, I think I like that
triggers.
line. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever the opportunity cost is, you cast your ponder next turn.
Yeah, you're just so far ahead, and not casting your ponder now lets you dig some, all the more deeper into your deck, and
True.
you have more information there.
We did let Steve draw into a misstep, but Snapcaster.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, Steve is, or rather, Bob has a lot of resources in play, so he might actually be able to play Snapcaster Yogwill. But
So much mana. Like he plays land go this turn, then next turn he can snap Yogwill and have 1 mana left over, so he gets the Gitaxian Probe and a Preordain.
yeah, all those probes in the graveyard, it's going to be pretty nice.
That's fair. Yeah, that probably is the best use of Snapcaster. It's just not quite yet.
Yeah, so if you're Bob and you have enough actions to where you can probably wait. I mean, giving Steve another draw step is like not exactly. I mean, it can be. There are reasons to not do it, but and it looks like Bob is just going to go ahead and play Snapcaster for a little bit of value, get another draw there. It's probably going to be another gush.
No
Does-
snapping of the Yawgmoth's Will. Actually,
Man.
don't know. Is this Ponder? Gush? It's not Time Walk.
It's probably going to be another ponder. He doesn't have a fetch land access, so that's going to be unfortunate. Like if he sees a good card and 2 bad ones, but man, you have Yawgmoth's Will in your deck. You have to get some value out of it. It seems like, but he just wants to get that right now before.
You
Steve
call that
comes
amnesia. That's not value?
up.
He
I
got all
don't
the
seem to
blue cards
remember.
out of his opponent's hand. Mentor Force Treasure Cruise. How's that for your Ponder?
It's all right.
But I think Bob wins the scoreboard defense of his line of play. This is going to work out just fine.
Yeah, it'll work out. So Bob's going to end up drawing treasure cruising into a bunch, and then he'll have force with mentor next turn, or he can wait. The downside to waiting is that he ends up being in the position that he was had he not cast ponder, where Steve has a turn to draw some sort of cantrip that'll let him claw back into this game. And here's the small cantrip, so let's see what happens. Preordain reveals 2 cards. Hopefully they're both good for Steve. And there's a ponder. So this Flusterstorm could end up being pretty good for Bob here now that Steve's tapped down to 3 mana. And
Right.
so Steve can draw an action spell, but then Flusterstorm is going to have him covered, and then he'll go untap Mentor, Treasure Cruise, and you know
It's
a
kind of
bunch of
just
other
the way you
stuff.
drew it up.
Yeah.
Flusterstorm, Scalding Tarn, and what was the third card? Pyromancer.
Yeah, it's not going to be good enough. Steve really needs to draw a spell, and you know, young Pyromancer is a good card, just with a handful of nothing. It's not really going to do anything. It's just slightly better than Snapcaster Mage at that point. So I would shuffle those away and just hope to redraw. It looks like
And
Steve
he
shuffled
did.
and he threw a Time Walk,
Do you
which I would be
Flusterstorm?
very. I would Flusterstorm this in a heartbeat.
I think I would too. He's empty-handed,
You know that you're drawing a Mentor. You know you're drawing Treasure Cruise.
and your opponent has
Alternatively,
5 mana.
you do have a therapy so that if you think that you're going to uh, like be in trouble against some permission, you can use that to clear the way. Like if
But
you
you're
think Steve
blind
draws
naming.
forcible.
I Flusterstorm here. I don't want to blind name Cabal Therapy and guess the wrong counterspell name.
Yeah, counter using Flusterstorm here is pretty good just because Steve's cards are also pretty low power level in this matchup, I think, except for the draw spells. And so, I mean, the Force of Will that's on top is or that's going to be in Bob's hand is going to be pretty good. So you've got a mentor to go and teach Steve a lesson. Uh, that's going to yield a monk at the very least, and maybe a few more, depending on how many moxes Bob ends up drawing into. We know that one of those cards is going to be Force of Will, and if another one is a blue card, then that's probably going to be lights out for Steve, especially with Cabal Therapy. It's going to be a lot of tokens.
Bob is beyond what he saw with the previous preordain, but 2 cards, chances are decent that one of them's blue.
Ooh, and there we go.
Yeah, throw the Lotus down for prowess.
Yeah, and that Lotus lets him cast Force of Will, which is great. You can
Sure.
use the mental misstep on a 1 minute spell if Steve draws that, and Force of Will on a non 1 minute spell if he draws that. So the clock right now is going to be at 18, and we've got.
I mean, Bob's probably got him next turn, right? Therapy you, flashback therapy, misstep it. Everything is +3. It's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I think that might only be 15. Maybe it's not quite lethal.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, if he's willing to blow his whole hand, I think he can get there by misstepping his own therapy and flusterstorming his own misstep.
yeah, we can do this. This first therapy is going to resolve.
Yeah, and it's good to see Scalding Tarn.
Yeah, the monk that it creates is going to flashback another therapy. Then Bob will probably take that line that you suggested, where he goes, flashback therapy, flusterstorm it, mental misstep, force of will, and attack for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots. That's going to be quite a lot of damage.
I think it might actually be Xaxes. It might actually be 18. Currently, we're at 12, and every spell is +3. Wait, what happens?
Creatures that can attack. His white creatures are going to be +5, so that's going to be.
Oh, here we go.
16, 18 damage. Yeah, exactly. Lethal. Wow, that was an impressive display of Monastery Mentor, and a good old-fashioned. Well, I guess a good blue matchup, blue on blue.
Yeah.
Haven't seen very many of those.
You jockey for position. Somebody gets up on cards. You leverage that into something. I do like the Mentors a lot better than Young Pyromancer. I feel like the Delver deck is just a little bit outdated at this point. The Mentor decks, my opinion anyway, I think they're just better. And especially with Chalice restricted to where now you can play all the Moxen and not feel like you're suddenly giving away some edge in the Shops matchup. I think Mentor is just better and better heads up, and I think a little more powerful against the field as well.
Certainly lets you turn the corner much more quickly than a Pyromancer.
Right. Yeah, we saw Tom win a game earlier last week. I mean, this trimester with his Mentor deck, where it's just like, what happened? He just all of a sudden here's Mentor Time Walk, and he wins out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, look at Steve. Like, He was at 20 last turn, and now he's taking 18.
Yup.
There was
Abandoned Hope is the card named with Cabal Therapy.
the only. Well,
Love
it
it.
looks like. There we go. Bam. More than enough.
Bob Maher, Monastery Mentor, gets the job done. Wow, that was a fun week.
Yeah.
Some great matches.
And if you go back to the bracket board,
The schedule. Is it
yeah,
just the guys on the left in the schedule defeated the guys on the right?
yeah.
Hilarious.
I don't know if Mashi Scanlon had any doing for to
The
like,
guy on the
finagle the
left.
results. Yeah, but he would surely be happy about this.
All right, so you're all by yourself in first place at 5-1. Going into,
Yep.
we do have a 1 week break now for the Pro Tour. Leave that up there for a sec. I was trying to figure out. I guess it's Rich in second at 4-2, and then who's he tied with?
Rich
Luis
is
got
at
to 4-2.
4-2.
Eric got to 4-2. So
Luis is at 4-2. Ifro is at 4-2, and
who's
then
3-3? Just Bob? Just Bob.
Yeah, it looks like just Bob is 3-3.
All by himself in fifth place, and then there's a 5-way tie for last at 2-4. Hilarious.
Yeah.
If the league ended right now, we would have an 8-player play-in tournament with 5 spots on the line. Wow.
That would be pretty epic.
That's
that would
crazy.
be pretty interesting to watch. So many open slots, it would be very interesting. Not that I want to shake up the roster like that much, but yeah, having that many slots open would be pretty significant. So that the composition of the league could change drastically, or it could not change at all.
Look, you can't shake it up that much. If we have an 8-person tournament with 5 spots, you're guaranteed to get at least 2 of these guys back in. There's only 3 other spots to invite other players into the play-in tournament.
Yeah, 3 spots is a lot, though.
Yeah, I'm just saying, you're guaranteed at least 2 of the 5 get their spots back. Still, 3 would be a lot of shakeup. We've obviously only done 1. Crazy. 5-way tie at 2-4. Going to be an interesting last trimester. Let's say that much. Going to be very interesting. We are going to be off next week for Pro Tour Atlanta, but when we come back, David Ochoa will be all by himself in first place. That's 2 weeks from tonight. New deck lists. Presumably, everyone will remember to send in new deck lists, even though they're distracted by the festivities in Atlanta. Maybe even some Oath of the Gatewatch cards. You think we're going to see Oath of the Gatewatch cards in Vintage? Is that you have any opinions on that?
There may be a few of them showing up, like Thought Not Seers or some stuff like that. I've been following discussion here and there, but I don't want to reveal anything. It's got to keep everyone on a cliffhanger.
Fair enough. I'm willing to reveal that I will not be on a Living Belcher deck. I'm going out on that. That's free. That one's free.
What about Belcher with Expedition Map?
No comment. Unlikely, but if I were playing Belcher, I would go back to the Expedition Map version of it. Wow. Fun week. So, Grand Prix this weekend, Pro Tour next weekend. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks for hanging out with me, Webb. Congratulations on the awesome start, sitting 5-1 all by himself in first place. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. We will be back in 2 weeks. See you then.
Yeah, thanks. See you guys around.